Welcome to the Northern Business Podcast. Each week we talk to people active in business and the economy about the big issues driving growth in the north of England. We're sponsored by Vertu Motors, one of the UK's largest motor retailers. Check out its website at vertumotors.com. I'm Graham Robb, owner of Recognition PR. We help scores of businesses promote their products and services. Some are featured on this podcast. Make sure you never miss an episode by subscribing on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Today we have Philippa Oldham, Stakeholder Engagement Director at Advanced Propulsion Centre UK, and Harvey Morton, Founder and Managing Director at Harvey Morton Digital. Later my colleague Joss will be speaking with Chris Beaumont, partner at Clive Owen LLP, Chartered Accountants. The firm has been doing a lot of very interesting work with academy schools. So let's start the programme by talking to Philippa Oldham. Hello, Philippa, joining us from the Advanced Propulsion Centre. Well, actually, you look like you're working from home today, but tell us about what the Advanced Propulsion Centre is.
So the Advanced Propulsion Centre was set up in 2013 at the request of sort of government and industry recognising the need to support the automotive sector in the transition to low carbon technologies, which is obviously now evolved to the zero emission technologies, but to really look at the ecosystem in what we could do to help businesses de-risk and accelerate those new technologies. So during that time, 10 years in the platform, we've invested and supported over £1.4 billion of funding into the sector and worked across multiple businesses, traditionally initially sort of supporting the OEMs and their developments. But as we've evolved over time, we now facilitate the Automotive Transformation Fund, which supports that capital investment and their scale up that's required to really grow some of that capability.
Now, you get into the detail of it, don't you? And if you look at the 10 years since you've been established, there have been significant changes in regulation that are driving the change. So Theresa May's government established the 2035 cut-off for selling petrol and diesel cars. That was revised downwards to 2030, now it's back at 2035. And also in that time, the EU brought in the 2035 rule as well. So that significant landmark bit of EU and UK regulation has come in. Has that spurred the technological change, or was the technological change being driven anyway?
Engineers always like a challenge. So I think it did encourage that change, and I think we've seen it accelerate. As I said, initially, 2013, the projects that were coming to us were very much about sort of engine efficiencies and looking at reducing the emissions, whereas over then it sort of swinged into sort of the electrification technologies, so a lot of batteries, power electronics and e-machines. And then in more recent times, we've been seeing more of the commercial larger vehicles coming through with an interest more in fuel cells and sort of the hydrogen combustion side of things in those areas that are harder to decarbonise. So really it's about that growth, but it's about making sure that whilst, the UK government is supporting a market trajectory, that we're also supporting that industrial side of things, recognising that a huge percentage of the UK's automotive sector is for export capability, and we want to ensure we retain that.
Now, Philippa, you spoke in the Northeast just before Christmas 2023 at a conference on critical minerals. And I think it is probably accurate to say that there is a developing supply chain in the north of England primarily, but not exclusively, that could take the supply chain from the minerals to the battery, from the battery to the drive chain, from the drive chain to the vehicle, from the vehicle to the customer. All the way through, it could be possible to deliver a vehicle and its propulsion systems in the UK. Is that too grand a statement to make? You can knock it down if you want. I'm just being optimistic and flourishing.
No, I'm all about optimism, definitely. And what we're seeing is great in the north of England for this. Everything from the, like you say, the extraction of the lithium, and these are a number of small businesses that are getting significant investment behind them. We're supporting them through the Automotive Transformation Fund that I mentioned earlier, but then looking at that refining capability. And actually, what's brilliant to see, and something that we do see within the UK, is the collaborative nature of all of these businesses actually looking at what they can do to share their best practices, their best ways of processing the information that they're getting, to really sort of join some of those dots at the early stage. But so, I mean, you talked about the battery side of it there, but also, you've got organisations like Penzana as well in the north of England who are looking at the refining of some of those magnet materials, so some of those rare earths and the permanent magnets. And actually, what do you do to feed that back into the chain? So it's not just about getting the materials from the extraction into the vehicles, it's about how you then get those materials back out. So we're not constantly digging things out the ground, but we're starting to think more holistically about sustainability and resilience in the UK, about how we can really manage the ecosystem and drive that growth and holistic approach.
I remember as a kid doing basic physics at O-level. I failed, by the way, just for full disclosure. But I do remember learning about electric motors and the requirement for magnets, but then finding out that in the north of England and there are developers of drive systems that don't require these magnets.
Yeah, definitely. And again, another great, story of the north of England is Advanced Electric Machines, AEM. So they've developed a motor, and actually they were a spin out of Newcastle University. So again, another demonstration of where the UK has great capability and strength in our university academic community, but spun that technology, which doesn't contain any of those rare earths in their magnets. And those motors are of real interest, actually. And AEM have worked with a number of different OEMs looking at how they can support the development of vehicles not using some of those harder to obtain materials to drive performance, and again help with the growth. And they've received significant investment recently, which is great, but also are growing that capability in the UK.
Now, does the Advanced Propulsion Centre have a point of view, and is it working with other forms of propulsion that aren't electric, for example hydrogen? Because there's a lot of desire to build hydrogen catalyzer plants now, particularly in Teesside, but I think in the northwest as well.
Yeah, definitely. We are technology neutral, recognizing that it's not a case of electrification or something else, but actually there is a real requirement for a mix. In actual fact, we have a company that we're supporting through our technology developer accelerator program, get the words out, Catalysis, who are looking at how they can produce ammonia by cracking ammonia, producing hydrogen by cracking ammonia. And actually, that's something that is, again, of real interest for those harder areas. Likewise, there's obviously Cummins, and they've been looking at how they improve the performance of some of their turbo charging technology, not only for improving the efficiency of their internal combustion engines, which will probably run on hydrogen, but also looking at the cooling and the efficiency of fuel cell systems. So really those heavier vehicles that we see in things, obviously the heavy duty logistics side of things, but also the off-highway. So a lot of the construction vehicles, for example, that we see, which again, we have a very big market stake in the UK in the off-highway sector. How do we ensure that we're anchoring that capability and technology and supporting them with the development of some of these cleaner non-fossil fuel developments, recognizing that we need to do something now, and actually hydrogen combustion can be a real solution for some of those vehicles as we sort of develop the capability around fuel cells.
I was talking to a senior director of a company that makes earth diggers. I won't name the company. There are only a couple in the marketplace, maybe 3. And he was saying that is exactly the way they've got to explore, because they've determined that if you are to charge a battery for an earth digger, you will require as much charge overnight as 100 houses would require in electricity, because the battery, for the kind of energy needed to have an earth digger, would be so big in terms of its capacity.
Exactly. And we've got to move the discussion away from it being either battery or hydrogen. The discussion's got to move away from that in terms of the capability and what we have access to. There's some really good examples of what's happening in the hydrogen combustion side of things. And actually, a lot of the testing results that's coming out of those organizations is showing that actually the emissions that come out, they are zero carbon. There is still some slight NOx, but actually with after treatments and developments around that, they become lower than the ambient background emissions. So actually they need to be part of the solution. Only this week we had, we've already increased temperature by 1.5 degrees. So actually, we need to be acting now with technology that we have available now to make sure we are moving as quickly as we can across all these different vehicle types to all drive the reduction in emissions.
I'm going to end on your technology developer accelerator program in a minute, but I think that some of the work you're doing, and I'll make this point, that it is true that when it comes to global emissions, they are higher. It is also true that the UK has led the world in its reduction in emissions, but we're only a tiny proportion of the world. But when it comes to the brains and developing the technology, we're way off there. Some of this stuff that you're talking about could be world saving if it were developed and sold to other countries.
And that's exactly what we're here for as an organisation, is supporting that collaborative research and development of these technologies. And actually, as I said earlier, the UK's automotive sector is renowned for its export capability. And actually, the discussions we're having with some of those OEMs, I mean, we saw, again, investment in the Ford Halewood plant to mean that they could develop that for their electric drive unit system. So that's shifting from transmission production to electric drive unit. And they're reckoning that there's going to be around 40,000 produced a year for the commercial vehicles and passenger car market through that plant. So what do we do to anchor and really grow that UK capability to support the jobs and growth?
I'd like to see, maybe this isn't down to you, but as I own now a hybrid car, and one of the things I'd like to see is battery degradation information. I know that battery will stop working in a few years, and it can't be replaced very easily. But whereas I can replace a battery in my watch very straightforward, or a battery in my lawnmower I can replace. But not in my car. And I think the industry probably needs to get across, while it's doing the innovation, it also probably needs to get into how does a customer buy a vehicle and maintain its lifespan for longer.
I think, and you've just hit on the battery management systems there, and that's where we're seeing significant companies through our Technology Developer Accelerator program. But really, the OEMs are looking at how they can manage those batteries and control them and develop them. So we're constantly getting that updated information and feed, and then hopefully feeding back to the user in how best to use their vehicle. But on a positive note, I think initially when we're looking at the electric vehicles that are now coming from first use into second use, actually the degradation is nowhere near where we thought it potentially could be. So actually batteries are performing much better than we did.
That's the same with solar panels. I've got solar panels on my house, and you get told that they only have a certain lifespan, but many people that installed solar panels 10 or 15 years ago are finding that the lifespans are greater than they were led to believe rather than worse. But it's a confidence issue. If you could replace your battery and you can replace your battery, it would give you more confidence, wouldn't it?
Yeah, potentially, that is a model that's been adopted by some of the OEMs out there who are trialing different schemes. I think, one of the things, again, we're seeing is when initially potentially some OEMs are putting a skateboard system, so it's on an all-integrated system, whereas actually as you're seeing more increase in, say, digital technologies in the design, so that vehicles are becoming, we're describing them as digitally native, is actually how do you make sure that things like the batteries would be replaceable? And again, that's a different business model that some of the OEMs are starting to consider. So it's very interesting seeing how, nobody globally has, that perfect answer yet. And, it's great for engineers. We love it because, there's always a challenge and always things that we can improve. But as you say, how do we make sure that the batteries that are in the vehicles are being optimized, but also where can we look at potentially those different chemistries that are coming through and making sure that they are not only performing as best as we can do, but actually are potentially more abundant, and actually then how do we re-extract them and then reprocess them back into the system?
Just finally then, people watch this podcast and listen to this podcast who are in business, and they know people in business, and there's a sort of cascade effect. Can regular people in business contact you if they've got something they want to develop related to advanced propulsion systems? If there are small businesses that don't know you exist, are you wanting to talk to these people, or is it all done through universities and so on?
No. We speak to everybody. We will speak to anybody about anything related to propulsion. Well, I'll speak to them about anything anyway. But really, just about propulsion technologies. Yes, I mean, really, our business development team and all of our teams are very supportive and engaging with whether you're a startup to right through to the OEMs, or if maybe you're looking at transitioning across the sectors as well. I think that's one of the things we see from a high power perspective in the UK, some of the transition between the off-highway heavy duty linkage with, say, maritime and rail. So actually, how do we pull some of that supply chain into the automotive side of things? But really, two areas of funding and actually calls we have open at the moment is our collaborative research and development program. So they are projects that can be up to 25 million with the number of different partners. They have to have a route to market, but again, engage with us on that. That closes on the 15th of March, but they sort of happen about twice a year. And how do you really, again, take those consortiums and that late stage research and development and really look at how you can accelerate the commercialization? And the second one probably that will be of interest to your listeners and your viewers will be the Technology Developer Accelerator Program, which is there to support companies. Up to 170,000 available there. But that takes companies for those startups, spin outs and small businesses, not only through that, technology development piece, but it also helps them with things like creating the right investment case and the pitching opportunity. It helps them to protect their intellectual property. It helps them develop their leadership skills and really look at how best they market their product offering as well. So it's like really whole suite of skills and techniques that we help support them with to make sure that we take those businesses forward.
Philippa, it's a brilliant, innovative centre, and I wish you all the best luck, because I think you're going to be really important for UK PLC in the years to come. Stay on the line. We'll come back to you right at the end. Thank you. Harvey Morton joining us now. Harvey, different entirely. Nice to see you. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. How are you?
Very well. What do you think of what Philippa's saying about the future of propulsion and vehicles? Is this the kind of thing that you think... Are you interested in it? Because you're a digital marketer, aren't you? You're in a new, modern, advanced zone yourself.
Yeah, always interested to hear about all the developments that are going on, and I think it's an exciting time, and to see how things are growing and building as well.
Now, you have written a new book, Succeeding as a Young Entrepreneur: Lessons in Life and Business.
That's right.
Young
yeah.
entrepreneurialism is so important. I've never actually had a paycheck. I've never paid PAYE tax. I've always been a self-employed person since I was 16. So it's sort of in my blood. Yet younger people now coming onto the workforce, there seems to be even more people choosing to be self-employed, taking advantage of different platforms and different methodologies to earn money. And the objective of having a job isn't automatically the first choice.
That's it. And I think Gen Z particularly are really wanting to do something and have a sense of purpose, whether that's in employment or whether that's in self-employment. So yeah, they're wanting to do something that makes a difference. And more young people are exploring self-employment as well, just because I think there's suppose a lot of toxicity around being in employment from a young person's perspective, from certain industries that are either hard to get into because everyone wants you to have some experience even for an entry-level role, and also those workplace cultures as well. So I think young people are starting to kind of make their own path so that they can get that experience and maybe move into employment later down the line.
I was interested at once to talk to a friend and a client of Recognition, my firm, Duncan Bannatyne, and he was, of course, on the Dragon's Den, one of the dragons on the Dragon's Den, and he always felt, going back 10 years ago so, that schools should, as part of the curriculum, teach an option that you can start your own business. And I know some schools have business clubs and so on, and actually more have done. on popular television, Dragon's Den, The Apprentice have become staples in cultural life over the last 10 to 15 years. And they are making it acceptable for people to want to own their own firms.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I started my business at school through a local enterprise competition called the Big Challenge, and basically teams from schools and colleges got £25 to start up a business idea. And that was what gave me my entrepreneurial skills. So I learned more from that experience than what I did in the classroom. And it was never the plan for it to turn into my career, but I think it just sparked something in me that wanted me to keep going, being self-employed, and still went through sixth form and university and everything like that. And then I got to the end of my time at university and decided to make a go of it properly. And that's why I chose to write my book as well, because I go into so many schools where, I mean, some schools don't even have a careers leader for a start, but none of them teach a lot about entrepreneurship. So there's definitely a gap in the market there. And if you think about how the pandemic has changed a lot of jobs and everyone's sort of moving to work from home, things have become more digital, and that's also meant that some jobs and different careers are mainly self-employed, particularly in performing arts and things like that. So yeah, the book covers starting a business, but it also covers working as a freelancer.
Excellent.
And that's yeah, that's something that anyone can do. That, I mean, the book's aimed at young people, but it's for anyone really, wherever they are in life, because lots of people decide they want a career change even, or to start a business later in life as well.
Yes, I do agree with this. I agree with a lot of what you said. By the way, I also think the government should get rid of IR35 to make it easier for everyone to choose to freelance if they wish, not to mandate people out of jobs, but to give people the flexibility they wish, if they wish to do so. I think when I was starting my business in the 1980s, the business itself, the impression was you were either Del Boy and some kind of spiv because you wanted to start in business, or you were some established figure, owned a factory and drove a Rolls Royce, and you were all very well to do. But the truth of it is there are many people, probably like you and I, from working backgrounds, who actually want to go into business for good reasons, starting with funding our own family and lifestyle, but then going on to creating jobs and employing people. And, you know, when I get up in the morning on the 1st of the month, I know that I've got 12 people's mortgages to find money for. And that it isn't exactly a social service because I'm getting rewarded for it as well. But it is certainly a contribution to society that goes more than just beyond enriching myself. And I think probably the new young entrepreneurs might think more like that than they will just of money.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of young entrepreneurs set out to solve a problem from their own experience as well, something that they want to change. I mean, for me, before I had that opportunity to enter that competition, I'd been through so much bullying at school. And even when I did come to enter the competition, some of my teachers said to me, "Are you sure this is what you want to do?" And after I'd made a success of it, they said, "Oh, you should be focusing on your studies, and that, you know, this isn't a full-time career." So I think that sparked something in me to want to prove them wrong.
I like that. That's a rebel. I like that. My own mother told me I could never work on the radio, and I gave up an apprenticeship in the steelworks and went and worked on the radio, and I'm glad I rebelled. But there we are. Now, so let's talk about a little bit more about your book. The Gen Z young entrepreneur has a different maybe approach to business than just making money. But there are a lot of dilemmas, aren't there? Because, you know, I was driving to work on Friday and the roads were relatively clear. It was damp. It was relatively early. I work a long day. And actually, I go to work and work hard. But there are a lot of people maybe of your generation, who want to just work on the basis that they have to do it their way. But life involves compromises, and if you actually want the rewards, sometimes you've got to just suck it up, haven't you?
Yeah, you've got to put the work in, and I think a problem that's arisen recently, probably since the pandemic, is there's lots of people on social media, even young people that have started a business, that tend to romanticize what their daily routine is
Yes.
actually like, and make it out to everyone that it's easy to set up being self-employed and you can come and go as you please. And I don't think that helps when people that are employed think of freelancers. They sort of imagine someone who just decides to work some days and not others. I think, you've got to put the work in, you've got to be passionate about what you're doing, and it is going to be hard, and you've got to compromise along the way because not everything will go to plan, and that's a really important lesson as well. I think when I go into schools and talk, young people are really excited at the thought of being able to start their own business. But until you get into it, no one really knows how much work is involved and how many late nights and, sleepless nights you'll have. And because, like you said, with you employing a team of people as well, you're responsible for their income as well. So you've always got to be working hard to make sure they get paid as well.
You're a young guy, and I know you set up your business and been a freelance relatively more recently than me. How did you feel the first time you had to fill out a tax form? How did you feel the first time you had to understand how VAT works? And do you think that is a necessary de-romanticizing that you have to get through in order to be a success in doing what you do?
Yeah, and no one teaches you how to do a tax return or anything like that. And, I had to sort of go out there and find people that could help or use online resources to teach me how to do it. And still, even then, it's hard to know how to get everything right in business. And these are the sorts of skills that should be taught to young people.
Yeah.
I mean, just finance in general, and for subjects in schools to be always related back to real jobs. I don't think there's enough of that goes on, and it sort of leaves you in this position where you do things for the first time, and sometimes you get it wrong because no one has told you how to do it, and lots of self-employed people and people in employment are just learning on their own a lot of the time with these things.
I was going to say one more thing that I hope you'll agree with me on. If you don't, please say. But I run a PR firm, and PR firms are notorious for having interns. And I like to have an intern, and once a year I have an intern. And I always pay the intern. And I think paid internships are very, very important. Because if you employ an intern, you get an obligation back. You got someone who's coming along free to give their time. They're not really obliged to you. But if you say, well, you've got to be here at 9 o'clock and you've got to finish the work before you leave, and so on, and you give them challenge for the quality thresholds they've got to try and achieve, even though you're teaching them as you're going along. If you pay them, you give them a sense of the work experience that's real.
Absolutely, and I think that's so important that people are paying their interns and anyone that they've got on work experience if they can, because I think in certain industries, I mean, I work a lot across media as well, and it seems to be commonplace for internships to be unpaid, for work experience to be unpaid. And yes, you might be giving that young person their first experience of the workplace, but by paying them, you're going to earn their respect and they'll be more involved in what they're doing because, yeah, they're getting the experience, but they're also getting the value of being paid and receiving that first paycheck as well. And those are experiences and lessons and skills that you can't teach elsewhere unless you do it right.
Well, having said that, I'm not paying you for this interview, but I hope your book will. And I'll just remind people about your book, which is Succeeding as a Young Entrepreneur, Lessons in Life and Business. Thank you, Harvey. We'll just flip back to Philippa as well. Philippa, are there any takeaways from you? I mean, it's clear that Harvey's approach gels in with your modern approach to the future as well.
It definitely, everything Harvey said is completely up and in, nodding away, agreeing with him. Because, yeah, I mean, in fact, I was at a school networking event the other day around sort of science, technology, engineering and maths. And one of the key things I said to them was, get out for work experience, because it doesn't matter if you've got the best grades in the world from an engineering perspective. You need to have worked in business and really understand the operation of how businesses work to get through. And again, just back to how it links into the technology, it's some of that transition of skills. Our jobs and that we support and the projects we support is about creation of skills and jobs, but it's also about transitioning those people to learn new skills and develop their capability and grow their own skills. And the entrepreneur thing, I mean, that's exactly what that Technology Developer Accelerator program is for, and why it's not just about developing the tech, but really, as you said, Harvey, giving them that rounder skill about, finance development, marketing expertise, how to have those sort of conversations. And it's really important to every business. And I completely agree that sometimes schools don't always apply what we should be doing in the real world, and actually I think students would benefit from it.
Well, Philippa, Harvey, it's nice to end this section on a note of agreement, and for two people talking about the future in a positive way. Thank you, Philippa. Thank you, Harvey. And now to something a little bit different. A couple of days ago in this studio, my colleague Josh Havican spoke to Chris Beaumont of Clive Owen LLP about academies and how they are being funded and working through their business life.
Thanks, Graham. Viewers may notice that this week I've had a promotion. I'm sat in Graham Robb's usual seat, and he is heading off, I hear, in a few weeks' time, so maybe you'll see me back here. Who knows? I'm very happy to be joined by Chris Beaumont, who is a partner at Clive Owen LLP. He's responsible for the not-for-profit offering that Clive Owen have, and I'm very happy to have him here today talking to me about a new report. Thanks for coming along, Chris.
Thank you for having me.
So, what is this report then? It's the Creston report on...
It's a report looking at the financial health of the academy sector. So within England, what you've got 22,000 schools. Over 10,000 of those have actually converted to be academies. Mm-hmm. And obviously, therefore, it's exceptionally important that we actually understand how financially viable those organisations are. So as a firm, we look after about sort of 60 trusts, which involve about 400 schools across the North East and Yorkshire.
Wow.
And what we do is we coordinate with other firms within our network, which is the Creston network, to actually look at that financial health. Overall, we'll look after, well, as you can see on the slide there, we look after nearly 300 trusts. That's sort of nearly 2,300 schools between the Creston network. So it's a fairly representative sample, sort of 12% of all trusts, 22% of all schools. So it gives us a good idea of the financial viability of those.
So the report covers, huge amount of schools, so it's indicative of what's happening across the whole of the academy sector. What are some of the key findings?
Well, what we found this year, and it won't be a surprise to many of your listeners, is that because of the cost pressures that are out there, and I mean, energy is one. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're looking at sort of typical increases there of sort of like 49% coming through a lot of schools, even with the sort of the caps and everything else that are in play.
So way above what people are paying at home?
Probably in line with actually what people are paying at home, but you'll know from your own bills, you were paying sort of 150 a month, you're now paying 225 a month, or whatever it might be.
If only it was that cheap, Chris, yes.
But what we've found is there have been very significant costing pressures coming through from sort of the energy, very significant cost pressure across the board. I mean, catering, obviously, food costs have gone massively. And therefore, whereas when we're looking at the results for the year ended August 2022, there were trusts predicting sort of, or actually had surpluses for those years, all types, bar the primary, small primaries. What we've got this year is all the trusts have got very, very small surpluses coming through. And when I say very, very small, I mean they're down by between 85 and 95% on what they were the previous year. So that is a very, very big reduction. And what that means is they need those sort of surpluses to actually invest in things like estates. And also in the reports that have been coming out from National Audit Office and government itself around actually the health of the sort of education estates.
Yep.
And actually the fact they need significant money spending in them. Well, actually at the moment, what we're finding is that actually the trusts don't have those surpluses coming through to then go and invest actually in the estates which they need to invest.
So I get the picture. They're struggling for cash. They need more money to be able to spend to improve their facilities, to improve their education. What's the solution going forward? What do schools and academies need other than a big whack of money?
Well, unfortunately, it probably would be a big whack of money, but as a country at the moment, given budgetary constraints, it's not as if we can put a big whack of money actually into things. So it's going to be up to trusts to actually look at actually how they're doing things at the moment. And actually, some trusts, because of the way that sort of reserves and cash balances are different, and cash balances tend to be very much bigger, they need to have a look at how they can sort of use those cash balances. So is it a question of they can put them on deposit somewhere, get 4 or 5%? I mean, for every £1 million, you're talking £40,000-50,000 of additional income. And some of these trusts come out 5, 6, 7, £8 million on their balance sheet, which is, it's there and is going to be required. But actually, if you can get the timing of that money right, it can actually give you some additional funds coming through. It's also things like looking at the estates programme and actually coming up with a long-term estate programme. So actually not just looking at sort of what we're going to do over the next sort of 12 months. But actually the next
Taking a longer-term view, yeah.
And therefore, it stops some of the decisions which have probably been taken over the last few years, whereby A's been done because it has to be done, and then 2 years later, that's almost being mothballed and basically end up with a bit of wasting money within the sector. That's not always a reflection on the trusts. That's sometimes a reflection on how the money is coming out of central government.
Well, it's a good job that so many of these trusts have got the services of Clive Owen LLP and yourself at their disposal, isn't it? Because it sounds like you're taking that longer term view, you're giving advice that's going to help them to secure their future and the future of the children that they're educating. So I suppose it's a fantastic job that you've got this report, and now there's some clear a clear footpath for them to continue down. So thank you very much, Chris. It's been a pleasure. Very interesting to speak to you. If someone wanted to read this report, where could they get it?
They can download a copy from our website, www.cliveowen.com, or if you send an email into our marketing contact, which is on the website, then we can send out a hard copy if you don't want to download a copy.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. Now, if you want to join us as a guest on this podcast, do contact my producer, Harry Sinclair, and he'll see if he can get you on. And thanks also to Harry for producing this programme and my technical operator, Joseph Sayer. Join us again, and don't forget to like or subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.